Trial is delayed for a Navy SEAL accused of committing war crimes while deployed in Iraq. What's stalling the process, and President Trump's possible role? The number of seniors will double in California in coming years. The challenge of staving off poverty for many among them. And a victory for critics of short-term rentals. The bill proposing strict restrictions clears the state assembly. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer, and joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today, Lori Weisberg, who covers tourism and hospitality for the San Diego Union-Tribune, KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh, KPBS investigative reporter Amitha Sharma, and Andrew Dyer, who covers the military for the San Diego Union-Tribune. Well, the acts described within the charging documents are characterized as war crimes, murder, attempted murder. They involve a Navy SEAL facing trial at Naval Base San Diego. President Trump has gotten involved, making the spotlight even brighter on what was already a high-profile case. And Steve, start with this pending trial. Who's the defendant? What are the charges?
So this is SEAL Chief Petty Officer Eddie Gallagher. He's accused of, in 2017, of killing a wounded prisoner who was in his custody, a teenage ISIS fighter that was brought to him by Iraqi forces in Mosul. He's also accused of using his sniper rifle to kill both an old man and a young woman.
So very serious charges, obviously. Yeah. And he has his defenders in Congress and among certain media, correct?
True. This case has become, I mean, it would have been high profile anyway. Navy SEALs don't go on trial for war crimes very often. So that would have already been a high profile. But there has been a tremendous amount of media spotlight here. You've had thousands of pages of documents leaked to certain media outlets. And you've also had his wife and brother. They've been on conservative media. You've had 20 congressmen that signed a petition to have Gallagher removed from the brig at Miramar. And eventually President Trump, he chimed in and moved him to the Naval Hospital in San Diego. Less restrictive. Yeah.
So it's been talked about, and this trial is delayed. We'll get to that in a second and why. But Andrew, I wanted to get into the claims by the defense attorneys, and that gets complicated in a second. But how did Donald Trump get involved in this case? And he's become news now.
Right. Well, it kind of started with Duncan Hunter, our local congressman, who, as early as Gallagher's indictment in early January, was functioning as an advocate for Gallagher and his family. And that kind of caught steam from there, from other Republican congressmen who kind of took up the cause, leading to Trump taking action on it. And now Fox, an attorney for a Fox News host, is now defending Gallagher, as well as Trump's personal attorney, Mark McCasey, is on the legal team now. And
he wanted these papers, and it looked like he might be thinking of a pardon even before trial. And now you said there was some news today where apparently the president's backing off of that.
Right. So the president's on his way to Japan to meet with the prime minister. But before he jumped on the helicopter, he talked to reporters, and he was asked about him potentially pardoning Gallagher and other service members charged with war crimes. And he said that, just to paraphrase, because of the controversy, he might wait until after the trial to actually take any action, if any at all.
In this case, there's a couple other cases he's looking at too, apparently.
Yeah, the case of an Army Special Forces officer who was investigated in, I think, 2011 for war crimes, was cleared, but then went on Fox News in 2016 and admitted to killing a civilian, an unarmed person in Afghanistan.
And as you say, the president says this is controversial. Has there been some real reaction to this notion of pardoning, especially before a trial, right?
Yes. Well, our armed forces overseas, they operate under the law of armed conflict and the Geneva Conventions, and our military leaders. And I think the American people kind of like it that way. We don't like to think of our troops going overseas and, killing indiscriminately. And so I think the concern is that by subverting that system, potentially that could send a message to our deployed forces that these rules don't matter.
I should mention one of the Democratic candidates for president, Pete Buttigieg, who's a veteran himself, weighed in on this because he was asked about Trump and this pardon. He says, if you're convicted by a jury of your military peers of committing a war crime, idea that the president is going to overrule and is an affront to the good idea of good order and discipline, the idea of the rule of law, the very thing we believe we're putting our lives on the line to protect. So it has gotten quite controversial as we go along.
Right. Even one of the congressmen that signed a petition to have him moved, Dan Crenshaw, who is a former Navy SEAL himself, said he would rather see this go through the actual military justice process rather than have some sort of a pardon preemptively.
Lori?
I was just wondering if Gallagher's gotten any kind of sympathy or support from fellow service members, or I mean, I think I've seen that they don't like the fact about the pardon, but is there any kind of sympathy for him? Or
because his main accusers are fellow SEALs, right?
Indeed, they are. 7 SEALs have been granted immunity to testify in this case. Now, his defense attorneys say some of that testimony may actually help exonerate Eddie Gallagher. But sure, you've seen a number of SEALs coming out in support of Gallagher, which, you know, this is a very tight-knit community, a very quiet community. They don't like being public in most cases. But when you have a Navy SEAL on trial, yeah, you've seen people coming out in support.
But, you know, when somebody pardons someone, the implication is that a crime has been committed. So...
Right. Now, his defense attorney, Tim Palatori, said after a hearing this week that you don't have to admit guilt to receive a pardon, though what they would rather see is that in the military court you have something called a convening authority, which is usually an admiral or a local commander. They would certainly like the president to take over and then go ahead and, rather than pardon him, dismiss the charges outright.
What I hear from both from the defense and from SEALs that I've spoken to, who are witnesses in the case, they've said that they would prefer him to go to trial, even if that means exoneration. The idea that he deserves a fair trial is prevalent, even among his supporters. They'd rather see him exonerated than accepting a pardon. Now, the case was supposed to go on Tuesday. It's been delayed, what, technically until next Friday? And what are the defense attorneys claiming here? They're saying there's some unfair things happening there, and they're pushing to have, what, the judge removed, the prosecutors removed, both?
Indeed. With everything else involved in this case, now there are allegations of spying by prosecutors on the defense. I mentioned earlier all the leaks that were involved here. And at one point, prosecutors have admitted that they put a tracking device on emails sent to the defense and to some reporters. And the defense is saying that's tantamount to spying. Initially, the allegation was that the judge had either allowed this or acquiesced to having this. After this hearing last week, his attorney, Parlatori, was less inclined to implicate the judge in this, but all of this will come to a hearing now on Wednesday. He was originally scheduled to go on Tuesday. This will all come to a hearing on Wednesday, and there'll also presumably be a motion to dismiss in there. But tentatively, it's Friday, but I think, Andrew, you've got some information where it might go a little bit later.
So the judge on Wednesday told the attorneys to get together and figure out a day that works for them, because the defense, because they've been dealing with this email spying, they say they haven't had time to prepare their defense for trial. So there might be a week or two delay. We're looking around June 10th, I think, is what the attorneys have tentatively agreed to. But that's not official until Wednesday, when the judge actually sets the date. But so I think early to mid-June is a likely start date right now.
So it does seem like the judge is eager to get this moving here. This has already been delayed once. I think this is going to be a 3-week trial. They'd still like to get it done by the beginning of July. Even the defense is saying that they have witnesses lined up. A long delay is going to make that even harder.
So I'm curious. So, you know, the rule of law is a phrase that's been thrown around a lot in the past 2 years. If these pardons were to go through, what would they do to the rule of law within the military?
Well, I mean, with a pardon, you're basically taking it out of the military justice realm. I mean, I've spoken to to attorneys that have talked about the implications of this case. And when you're talking about somebody like Eddie Gallagher, these are not what you would consider to be fog of war, which a situation where there's a fog of war. These are a situation where a prisoner was brought to him, and if it's true that he indeed stabbed him, that would have direct influence on soldiers who may be captured by enemy forces, captured by an ISIS around the world. And people are watching this very closely.
So it's being watched everywhere, not just in this country,
certainly.
but around the world and in the Middle East.
One of the reasons we follow the rules is because we want others to follow the rules as well.
It gets to the whole question of torture, which we've talked about as well on the show. Well, a couple seconds left in this segment. Likelihood this would get dismissed, or that the prosecutors would be removed, or the judge recused, or hard to tell, huh?
And we'll find out Wednesday whenever these motions are argued in front of the judge. Prosecutors are confident that they are in the right, and that the software they attached to the emails, that everything's on the up and up and was legal. The defense says otherwise, so I'm interested to see what the judge says.
We all are. We'll look for your
And
coverage.
just because it's you have a prosecutor recuse himself, they can always just bring in another prosecutor and go full steam ahead from there.
Yeah. All right, we'll see what happens on Wednesday. We'll look for your reports. We're going to move on. The California image of the forever young frolicking through an endless summer is slamming into demographic reality. The number of seniors in the Golden State is set to double in the next 25 years. That means new challenges and new opportunities. KPBS this week hosted a town hall forum featuring experts discussing what it all means. And Amitha, you and Jade Heineman of our staff hosted this forum. Start with these experts. Lay the scope for us. Who participated?
Well, we were very lucky. We had a very esteemed panel of experts. We had Betsy Butler, who heads the California Commission on Aging. We had Paul Downey, who is the president and CEO of Serving Seniors here in San Diego. We had Kevin Prindiville, who's the National Executive Director of Justice and Aging. And we had a USC gerontology professor by the name of Donna Benton.
Okay, and give us the overview on these numbers. I mean, they're really startling demographics.
Well, they are. So you nailed it in your intro when you said, look, the number of seniors in the state of California is set to double over the next 25 years. By 2030, we're going to have 9 million seniors. And so what that does is it skews the demographics. Depending on who you believe, you're going to have anywhere between 20 to 25% of California's population being made up of seniors. So there will be more seniors than there are people 19 and under. And what that does is it dramatically alters the landscape. It changes housing, it changes the public services that are needed, it changes transportation. There are a number of seniors in this state who currently are bedlocked and they are in dire need of transportation. And then people who are not in such dramatic situations, they also need transportation. But more important than that, there are a number of seniors in this state who are paying 70% of their income on their home. And that can't be sustainable. More affordable housing is needed.
So that was the big issue the experts were talking about.
That was the issue. The most important need that seniors have right now is affordable housing. Here in San Diego, there are some affordable housing complexes that are set to open. The waiting lists are hundreds long. The chances of those people getting in anytime soon is next to zero. And the governor has said that he wants to build hundreds of thousands of affordable housing units over the next decade. 3 million in overall, 3 million new housing units, but then hundreds of thousands of affordable housing units within that. And as people said at a sit-in recently in Sacramento, seniors said this at a sit-in, that we will be dead by the time those homes are built. They need something now. And yet their chances of getting in to an affordable housing unit right now are like 7 to 8 years, within 7 to 8 years.
And there were some opportunities or some creative solutions talked about as well, some like communal situations.
Well, one of the suggestions that's being thrown around and actually implemented right now is seniors moving in together. We did a story on that in the last week or so, where you have maybe an older senior and a younger senior moving in together, and then the younger senior helps the older senior. Or then you have these intergenerational arrangements where you have older seniors living with people in their 40s or in their 20s. And that, they believe, is extremely effective because, one of the issues affecting seniors is social isolation. So if you are surrounding them with people who are younger, that keeps them vibrant and in the mix. So in LA County, they're actually really pushing this idea of seniors rooming with seniors. And it is happening more up and down the state, but there aren't any numbers on it.
Lori?
Last year we did a big piece, a takeout, looking at how older individuals are working longer, and for a number of reasons, but the disappearance of the pensions, there's not enough money to live on, they want to work longer, and I'm just wondering, given, and because of the high cost of housing too, so I'm wondering if you, in your reporting, you are finding that they are having to work longer. And we also encountered the issue of age discrimination, that older workers can't get back into the job market. So I think that's kind of wrapped up into these challenges facing older individuals.
In our reporting, we found both. Seniors are working longer, and seniors who want to offset their expenses by continuing to work or maybe restarting work are having a heck of a time finding a job. There's one woman who said that, when she walks into an employer and hands them her resume, they don't even look at the resume. They look at her and say, sorry, we don't have anything. So she doesn't believe that she's being evaluated on the merits of her experience. So ageism is real. How you deal with that, I don't know that anyone has come up with a good answer yet.
And poverty, of course, not having a job and needing the income leads to poverty. What are the numbers looking like among seniors with poverty?
Those are equally stark. So going by the federal poverty lines, which are much lower than the state's poverty lines, 1 in 5 seniors in California are living in poverty, 20%. If you combine that with the state's poverty numbers, it is more like 47%, so nearly half of the state seniors are living in poverty. And they are struggling to pay their rent. And they're having to make choices between paying their rent, paying for food, and paying for medication.
Do you look at all at the other end of the spectrum? I've talked to sources who are former Californians who are now living in other parts of the country. And they take that wonderful California housing equity and they take that money and they go live in Colorado, which I have to imagine means there's going to be a net outflux of money from California to other states.
And people, if it hasn't already started.
Well, so that's already started. Yeah. However, the number of seniors living in the state don't actually back that up. Most of the people who are living in the state are hugely employable, but they tend to be younger families, middle-class families who want to be able to sustain that middle-class lifestyle, but can't find a job that can support that in the state because of the high cost of housing and everything else. So they're leaving in droves. And they're not poor, uneducated people who are leaving. They are people who are in relatively good paying jobs, but they still can't afford a home.
So it's a kind of brain drain.
It is a brain drain. The other aspect of this is that the seniors who might pick up and leave, that's at a cost to them as well, because then they'd be leaving friends, family, they would be leaving doctors, just networks of people that take, decades to build up.
Well, I'd encourage people to go to our website and look for this special event that occurred this week, and we'll be talking a lot more on the show as we go forward. We're going to move on now. Well, critics of Airbnb-type rentals in San Diego scored a big win this week in the California Assembly. Lawmakers passed a bill that would cut way back, that is, on short-term rentals in our coastal areas. So start there. What's the bill do, Lori?
So this bill, even though it's a state bill, it's directed just at San Diego County's coastal communities, and it targets the platforms themselves, the Airbnb, HomeAway, and says that no one platform can have a residential listing where the owner is absent for any more than 30 days out of a whole year. That's a big limitation. Now, conceivably, you as a host can platform hop and do 30 days on Airbnb and 30 days on VRBO, et cetera. But it's a big change, and it's a big change for San Diego County because the coastal communities from Coronado to Carlsbad, there's a very different set of regulations in each city. Carlsbad allows them, Coronado bans them. So you're trying to, some critics of this bill say, you're trying to impose a one-size-fits-all on the county, where that just isn't possible.
Why is it only aimed at San Diego County and not other?
So the legislator that proposed this is from Encinitas, and it did start out as a California-wide bill, and then it predictably, it just went back to San Diego County. I don't think there would have been enough support for a statewide solution on this. So it's nothing usual to carve out a county for a bill, but in this case, it did. And
a guinea pig thing?
It is, and she's also characterizing it. The legislator Tasha Burner Harvath, she's characterizing it as kind of like pilot program because it expires it would expire in 5 years, and then you can see what kind of impact it has. Her motivation is we have a affordability problem, we have a housing supply problem, and the proliferation of these short-term rentals are taking long-term housing out of the supply. And that's a debatable argument, but that's her argument.
All right, and how likely is this restriction to pass the Senate and then get signed into law by the governor?
So part of me that's kind of surprised it's gone this far, but it'll be interesting because then it goes to the state Senate and the state Senate committees, and it's very possible that she's already amended it to some degree, but it could get amended more. And there's also a question, how much will the legislators defer to the San Diego delegation, which there's a split on this. Like Todd Gloria, a Democrat, voted no on it. Lorena Gonzalez and Shirley Weber voted yes for it. Republican representatives voted no. So there's, the question is how much deference will they give to local legislators? And then you've got in the county itself, you've got Del Mar supporting the bill. You've got the Oceanside mayor opposing the bill.
So a big split. It really remains to be seen how it progresses through. All right, busy time on your beat this week here. We're going to get to another story here. And 4 plans put forth to bring high-speed transit to Lindbergh Field. To give us the high points of those.
So they're looking at 4 basic routes. 3 of them involve a people mover. It could be underground, above ground, and it would be connected to a Grand Central Station, which doesn't even exist yet, but it could be on the military spy war property, or it could be on a location just a little bit further south of that, but they're both still north of the airport. And so the idea would be to link that, and then you would link the rest of the county so that so that people from anywhere in the county could get to the airport with no more than 1 transfer. And then the 4th option involves an extension of the San Diego trolley. So the next step before anything further is done is they're going to model these and see how fast is it, how cost effective is, which option comes out on top when you model it, and then they'll move on to do environmental studies, et cetera, et cetera.
It's going to be a while, but what did it do the step back on this? What are the big complaints now about what we're lacking when it gets people getting to the airport?
That there is in a city of our size, there is no real public transit unless you take maybe an express bus. That's about it. And this all erupted because the airport authority wants to do a $3 billion plan to expand Terminal 1. They did an environmental impact report, and all the other surrounding agencies were critical of it because it put in nothing for improving roads and for doing transit. So the mayor of San Diego, Faulkner, and the SANDAG executive director got together, and they formed this subcommittee. It's kind of kumbaya now. They're all talking to each other, and the hope is that they'll come up with a plan. But it's going to be very expensive. It could be in the billions of dollars.
Well, that's my next question. Now, you're already talking about a $3 billion plan for the expansion of the terminal. We won't even get into an alternative airport site in the 50, 60 years we've talked about that. But where's this money come from? And we're talking about billions here, right?
I suppose another sales tax increase, which is, on the table. I don't know. That's where it would have to come from. And then the question is, like I said, a big part of this is this idea for a Grand Central Station, that's even more money. So it makes me wonder whether the easiest solution is the trolley or just the fallback position of just more express buses.
All right, we've got about a minute left. Mitha, you were going to say something profound. No, I'll say something profound here. Steve, go ahead.
No, I live in Ocean Beach, which is right on the other side of Point Loma from the airport. It strikes me that they can't expand that airport much more and still expect people to get in and out of it. It's already fairly gridlocked right now.
Right.
For a metro area this size.
No kidding.
Right, and so they did talk about all of these plans, with the exception of the trolley one, would involve a reconfiguration of Laurel to make it the main ingress and egress out of the airport.
Laurel Street, which comes down the hill, of course. to the
Yeah,
airport.
so there's that idea of maybe better off ramps and stuff. But again, all those dollar figures adding up. It'll be interesting to see how far they can go with this. But we are, for a major city, you don't have, a subway or a trolley or a metro that goes to it. So that's a big complaint. And as the growth continues to occur, whether expanded or not, there's going to need more transportation help access.
Well, we'll certainly look forward to your coverage of this as we move forward into the summer and the plans come to fruition, we hope. Well, that wraps up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Lori Weisberg at the San Diego Union Tribune, Steve Walsh of KPBS News, Amitha Sharma of KPBS News, and Andrew Dyer of the San Diego Union Tribune. And a reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today, and join us again next Friday on the Roundtable.